In an industry where it seems like the only type of content people want to make is rage bait game bashing videos, I wanted to take some time and talk about something that nobody really thinks about anymore. Some may only know them as missions or milestones, but for many of us, we all universally understand one timeless and meaningful phrase. It invokes emotion in us that we may not have felt in many years. The quest. While this isn't meant to be a history lesson, I wanted to briefly talk about the early concepts of quests in gaming. Questing has been around since day one. In fact, pretty much every single game has some type of goal. It may not be called a quest, but it is what it is. In games like Super Mario, you have to navigate through various obstacles to complete the level and move on. That's a quest. Conversely, in a game like Black Ops, you have to fight through enemies to progress through the story and complete the mission. No matter the genre, there's always some form of quest involved. For me and my gaming experience, the introduction to the classic quest was playing Star Fox on the N64, and after that, I was introduced into more PC gaming where everything exploded. I started playing MMORPGs such as Star Wars The Old Republic and The Elder Scrolls Online, and that was where I first fell in love with narratives woven carefully into the gameplay experience. I played some single-player games before, like The Force Unleashed and LEGO Indiana Jones, but for some reason I never thought progressing through those games as questing. The MMO titles that I've mentioned have so much lore-rich history behind them. SWTOR taking place in the iconic Star Wars universe, and BioWare, which was known as the best story developer in gaming working on it, was a recipe for instant success. The Elder Scrolls Online comes from just as much of an iconic lore-rich world introduced to us through the Elder Scrolls games. It would be insane to mention MMOs without talking about the king, World of Warcraft, but it needs no introduction. When you think about your favorite game, what did you enjoy about it the most? Was it the combat? Was it the story? Maybe it was the world building. I'm going to make the assumption that a lot of us think about our favorite games and almost immediately think about the story. But here's the thing. Is it really about the story? Or is it about the quest itself? BioWare released banger after banger with their Mass Effect series and Knights of the Old Republic, respectively. Not only were the stories memorable and made us feel various kinds of emotion, but they also are captured in our memories because of the questing to progress the story. You remember that part of the quest that you just couldn't figure out? Or what about the other quests that you really enjoyed? It would give you this rush of adrenaline, fighting a boss or solving a really difficult puzzle. Those moments are what made those games for us. I'll never forget finishing my Bounty Hunter storyline in SWTOR for the first time. The sense of accomplishment I felt, the connection that I had formed, not just with my character, but with my companion Mako, was something I couldn't really explain. BioWare games were pretty unique in the fact that choices really mattered. The month it took me to complete that story in 2012 was so satisfying because of the hundreds of choices I made along the way. The quest in gaming has served as a vehicle to tell a compelling story that brings you in as a player. You can look at games like Portal, Half-Life, and Dead Space as well. What do all of those games have in common? Great quests put together by a compelling journey. So if questing is so awesome, why does it feel like nobody cares about it anymore? Over the last decade, it seems like the quest has been degraded in a few ways. The first and most obvious examples of this is dumbing down the quest steps. Older games made you think about what you needed to do in order to progress through the story. You can find a great example of this in old school RuneScape. I had watched most of a series by Mad Season Show where he plays OSRS for the first time. He spent a lot of time in this series talking about all of the different things he had to figure out for himself to progress his character's story. Some things were frustrating to him, but he talks about how surprised and appreciative he was of some of the depth in these quests.
Even though I've just started, I can already tell that the questing isn't just something to slog through to get to the actual game. It is the game. And if there's one thing that I would make as a selling point, this is it, because it's currently offering something that I haven't found anywhere else within the genre. But as far as the actual content of the quests is concerned, RuneScape is hard to match. Like, these are actual quests that you would expect to find in a single-player RPG. They require problem solving and route planning, not just go kill 10 Defy smugglers and trappers. And I gotta say that not following any guides and actually having to puzzle this stuff out has been pretty intimidating, but also really rewarding when I do actually figure it out.
Now, this could all be summed up by the mass adoption of more theme park styles of questing over a sandbox method. Don't get me wrong, if I had to think, I probably have played more theme park games than sandbox, but I've still noticed that shift. Questing continued to get easier. Every step with the quest has been spoon-fed to us so that we don't get bored, frustrated, and quit. Think about that for a second. Gaming slowly devolved into taking away any and all friction from the player. I hate bringing this up because it's talked about way too much, but it's that dopamine hit. There are so many of those dopamine hits in newer games that the older games that require you to think and explore aren't even made anymore. This isn't to disparage players who enjoy games with no friction. I enjoy them here and there as well. It can be nice to just get on a game and not think, but I believe that might be part of why gaming has been so frustrating for a lot of people. I'm not saying that games have to be super hard or unnecessarily complicated. What I am saying is that games should have some element of friction to them. That's the hook. That's the itch we need to scratch. It's that feeling of anticipation we get from working up to that one boss fight. It's the frustration of getting killed or having to restart from a checkpoint. And it's the joy and sense of pride and accomplishment when we finally topple that giant, when we reach the peak of what we've been working towards. Another part of why questing seems so lackluster is how it's been deployed in cheap ways. And yes, I am talking about the daily quest. This topic is something that I admittedly have a love-hate relationship with. My main genre of game for 15 years was the MMORPG. A staple in the MMO industry is the daily or weekly repeatable quests. In a game like New World, WoW, or SWTOR, dailies provide useful elements for players. You'd have a daily area or zone where you could complete a select set of missions, and in exchange, you'd be rewarded with currency, faction reputation, and experience. Back in the day, those quests made a lot of sense to do. It generated money for the player, it gained reputation that would allow them to unlock unique rewards, usually cosmetic only, which offered a sense of exclusivity if you dedicated the time to working up to max reputation level. You might be wondering how any of that is different from the daily quests of today in games like Fortnite, Valorant, or Overwatch. Because in MMORPGs, you were attached to the world. You spent all your time there, building up your character's power level. The story and world building in these games is almost unmatched in the gaming landscape. So there's all this goodwill built up between the player and the game itself. You also were not introduced to a lot of daily quests and daily zones at lower levels. You were introduced to them slowly as you progressed, and the value exchange was clear and, at the time, worth doing. In these newer games, you are hit with daily quests and login rewards from level 1, or day 1. Without any goodwill built up, you're being told that you should log in every single day so that you don't miss out on experience, rewards, and so on. I don't blame the new player for being taken by these flashy things, especially when we all know how much time companies put into getting you to feel some sort of FOMO. With that being said, in some of these games, you get rewarded for doing nothing, which goes back to the frictionless nature of gaming these days. In the MMO scene, Daily quests had, and still have, a specific purpose. Even though some of the newer MMOs don't have quite as beneficial of an exchange, I still believe it works in the large part. Having a daily quest in a single player game also makes zero sense to me. You're playing alone, at your own pace. You have nobody to show off your gear to, so where does that pull to progress in a daily scenario come from? It's really bizarre if you ask me. I'm not saying that no modern game has that level of depth anymore, because you can find these pleasant experiences in indie titles. I've been on record saying that the indie game hype is a bit overblown, and I still hold to that belief, but it is undeniable that some of these indie studios have brought back some of the magic that the AAA titles have lost over the last decade. The explosion of open world games plays a part in the subtle decline of the quest. Hear me out on this. Massive open worlds were mostly kept in the MMO scene. That makes sense. The problem now is that everything is open world. Maybe this is a hot take, but I believe that these studios are trying to substitute real quest progression and depth with a massive open world to simply traverse and awe at. Now, don't get me wrong. I love big open worlds given my gaming background, and I'm not saying that single player games can't have good open worlds, but how many times have we heard about these big titles having massive, expansive, and explorable worlds that have zero depth and no reason to explore? A more modern example I want to use from my personal gaming experience is Star Wars Outlaws. I'm also on record saying that I really enjoyed Star Wars Outlaws. If you want to see those details, you can check out that video here. In my opinion, Star Wars Outlaws had a decent story, the questing was pretty neat, and I loved sneaking through Imperial or pirate bases. It was a fun experience and one that I'll probably replay at some point. This game has a pretty big open world too, but when it comes to any depth, I believe it suffers a great deal. In some of the promotional videos, they talked about the travel time on your speeder, a 5-minute speeder ride from one end of the planet to another, in a single player game. Why on earth would you need to travel such large distances just to talk to a guy, who will then make you talk to another guy across the canyon just to get a blaster coil to then drive back to the original quest giver? Why do that? I'm sure the argument to be made here is that you can take your time getting through the main quest and explore along your travels. I agree you could do that, but to me I was heavily invested in the main narrative of Outlaws, and I wanted to see what was next. I'm sure some of the side quests were cool, but that wasn't what I was looking for. If you think about a game like Skyrim, there was definitely things to explore alongside the main questline, but Skyrim made you want to explore. Not because the world was massive, but because the game pulled you in with its narrative. The world building was phenomenal, and because you were so captivated by the narrative and world building, it led you to want to explore other things. Having an open world is great, but it becomes hollow when that's all it is. If you want another example of this, you can look at Anthem. That's another game that I really enjoyed and was really excited for when they announced the game. But the story was bad, and while the open world was so much fun to explore while flying around in a javelin, it was all a little hollow. There's a reason why it was called Iron Man Simulator. When I would play it, I wouldn't even bother questing. I would just fly around, literally cooling my jets in a waterfall because it was so freaking awesome. Rest in peace, Anthem. You will be missed. I hope you can see the point I'm making here. A great quest prompts exploration. Unless it's Anthem. The various quest stages in a game used to be handcrafted, and while I don't want to minimize what the writers do, I imagine they're under orders to write campaigns in a certain way. Another good example of what this would look like is the Halo franchise. Those games weren't really open world, but again, the story and world building led you to explore. That's how you found Easter eggs and so forth. Studios have cheapened the open world experience by trying to make it replace the quest. Long travel times for no reason, and it becomes boring and the game suffers because of it. I'm sure there's probably going to be some of you that will say something like, Noble, you just need to play indie games more, and you'll find that questing magic. And to that I say, you might be right, but this video isn't about the battle between indie devs and big gaming. This is about something much more important and meaningful to anyone that enjoys games. It's the art of the quest. It's about the narrative, the world building, the meaning of progress in a thoughtful and creative way. Yes, it does seem like most AAA games have gone away from that type of creativity, but I believe there still could be some great games in the future that return to form like I talked about in this piece. Great narrative, engaging quests, and creative world building shouldn't just be limited to indie studios. It should be a staple in all games. For those of you who have made it this far, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching and listening to what I have to say. This video took me a long time, so there might be a little bit longer of a break between this one and the next, but either way, I hope you will subscribe if you found meaning or got anything out of what I've talked about today. It's just me behind the microphone working on all of this, and I appreciate you taking time out of your day and spending it with me as we talk about games, something that we all love very much. Thank you again to everyone who has listened this far or watched this far. I really do appreciate it. I will see you guys in the next one.